Dr. Perriman, I appreciate you being here as always. Now, your company just published a brief relating to the tariffs on Mexico and Canada, 25%, I believe, if that's correct. So, what did that brief? What'd you find?
Well, if you look at the 25% tariffs on Mexico and the 25% on everything except energy from Canada, 10% on that, and you look at if you put them on and sustain them, not put them on and take them off a week later, but if you put them on there and they stayed on permanently, you'd see a loss of about 1.9 million jobs in the United States, and it would lower our gross domestic product by about $250 billion a year.
When you say permanently, is that like a 10-year time frame, or do you mean like, because obviously I know permanent means, but when we're talking
Sure,
about these
sure.
tariffs.
Oh, I think if they stayed on as much as a year, year and a half, you'd start seeing losses of this magnitude. It wouldn't take long for that to begin. Some of it should begin to see immediately. Things like
So,
things
so
like that.
over 1 million jobs in 1 year.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if those are, what if there's just one, just Canada, just Mexico? Would that have a substantial impact on the number of jobs?
Yeah, yeah, we have it broken out, but basically for the two countries in the brief, which you can just pull up on our website if you want to. But basically it's about $145 billion a year from as a result of the tariffs on Mexico, about 95 billion for the tariffs on Canada.
Okay. So how does that compare to other tariffs that have been implemented, whether it be by the United States or other countries in the past?
Well, fortunately, we haven't seen anything like this in a long time. The World Trade Organization, which is basically where you implement tariffs, if you don't have a trade agreement with somebody, you're supposed to default to those rates, is only about 4%. And so basically, we haven't seen anything of this magnitude in a long time, except for some of the emerging developing countries. A lot of times when countries are first developing, they think if they put tariffs on everything, they can make it all for themselves, and they quickly find out that doesn't work.
So it doesn't sound like you believe these tariffs are a good idea.
They're not a good idea, and I don't think they would possibly be implemented and sustained for any lengthy period of time. They might go into effect for a short period of time, but very quickly, I think they would be reversed.
Now, President Trump initially, put tariffs on Mexico and Canada. That's since been rescinded. When you look at, the rhetoric surrounding tariffs, how does that impact the U.S. economy on a global scale? Just the rhetoric we're seeing from the administration.
Well, it certainly creates uncertainty. I mean, you see global financial markets reacting when they're announced, when they're put on, when they're put off for 30 days. I mean, markets are reacting to all of this. I think there's been a lot of misunderstanding about tariffs. A lot of people seem to think that somebody else is paying the tariffs, but you don't pay a tariff until the good comes into the United States. Whoever receives it in the United States pays the tariff, and then most of it gets passed on to consumers. But there's a lot of confusion about it. But if you watch the world financial markets, they react to every move back and forth. I mean, they even reacted when we put the 10% tariffs on China. They reacted then, and they reacted again when China put tariffs back on us. I mean, this kind of thing goes back and forth all the time, and the markets are very, very much aware of it.
Now, President Trump, after talking with Canada and Mexico, that he says that both those countries are going to put more troops on the border to stop the flow of illegal drugs. Do you think that may be intentional, using these tariffs to get a goal that he wanted during the campaign, which was to secure both the north and southern border?
Oh, I think to some extent it's strategic, yeah, because again, you literally could not do this and keep them in, and it would not be good for any of the three countries. Yeah, I think some of it is a strategic negotiating tool and that type of thing. I'm just hoping that we get something worked out where they don't come into effect at all, because that would really be detrimental. We've had free trade agreements, which I was involved in the first one and the second one in putting them together, going back 30 years now. We've had free trade agreements with Mexico and Canada, and we've really stitched these economies together during that 30 years. And if you start trying to rip those seams apart, you're going to get some very big impacts.
Yeah, walk me through that, because it's my understanding that you worked on NAFTA. That was a big trade agreement. So when you look at, the what those alliances said regarding tariffs, now it's the USMCA, they've outlawed tariffs effectively, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, but basically, with a very, very few minor exceptions, and the USMCA, roughly 99% of all the commerce back and forth between the United States and Canada and Mexico is tariff free, and that's been beneficial to all of the states.
When you look at just these tariffs in general, what could you see being the lasting impact of them, not just over the next 4 years for the Trump administration, but for the next decade plus?
Well, as far as the numbers are concerned, if they stayed in place and were kept in place, beyond the next 4 years, which again I think is very, very, very unlikely, because the harms of this and the impacts it would have would reverberate back to consumers very quickly. They'd let it be known that they didn't like this. But if you kept it in, obviously you'd have these sustained economic losses. You would break down a lot of the efficiency we've achieved. A lot of people don't realize this, but like in some of the cars that are manufactured now, pieces of it go back and forth 5 or 6 times across the border during the manufacturing process. We've integrated the economy so much, and a tariff would be imposed every time it crossed the border. You would see those tariffs imposed. And beyond that, this is part of a working relationship with our neighbors that for the past 30 years has worked very, very well and led to a lot of confidence in investments and a lot of other things, helped justify capital investments. There's a lot of different things going on here. As I said, these economies are really stitched together in some fundamental ways right now. And you start ripping those stitches apart, it's going to have some consequences.
And what are you expecting as a result of the tariffs on China? Because this is not the first time we've imposed tariffs on them.
Yeah, these are in a little bit different category. We've already had some tariffs on China. In fact, we had some in effect now. This added to those tariffs. Again, you don't want to see it. They've turned back and retaliated on some of our goods as well. We see that going back and forth. In terms of sheer magnitude, China's our second biggest trading partner. Mexico's first, Canada's third. So there's a lot of potential dollars involved. It will have some impacts. We may be putting out some numbers on that if they're sustained and something else doesn't happen. And again, you hate to see that happen. And it will raise costs. It will be inflationary, not to the same degree as 25% tariffs on the other two, but it would maybe raise inflation 2 or 3 tenths of a point a year. It would cost us quite a few jobs in the United States. But it's a different situation also in that our relationship with China is very different. I mean, we have a very good, strong, long-term symbiotic working relationship with Canada and Mexico, and they're our neighbors. And China, it's been more adversarial over time. And so the impacts would not be as we haven't integrated those economies as much, but we get a lot of our consumer goods from China, for example, and those you're going to see some inflationary effects on those and things of that nature.
You foresee costs going up as a result of the tariffs implemented on China?
Sure, absolutely. I mean there'll be other factors hopefully bringing costs down, but a lot of consumer goods, a lot of things that we go buy every day in the store, a lot of those things are made in China. Some of the component parts for some of our manufacturing are made in China, and all of those things will come in. They'll be more expensive than they were before, and as a result of that, we'll end up seeing somewhat higher prices. I think it's going to be on the order of 2 or 3 tenths of 1% in inflation, as opposed to about 1% in inflation for this one. The average household, if you look at the inflation in the supply chains, the average household, as a result of these tariffs on Canada and Mexico, if they were sustained, it would cost them like $1,500 a year. People start to notice that.
Is there anything else you'd like our audience to know about these tariffs?
Only that I don't think they will ultimately come into place and stay in place, and that's in all of our best interest.
Dr. Perriman, we appreciate you taking the time.
You bet. My pleasure.